Hello, and welcome to the lore of Braunhaven. Today we're going to be talking about basically the politics of the capital city of Drzewodolek, and that will include the High Elven Elder Council as well as the houses of Drzewodolek. We may be able to touch on the guilds as well. Originally, I was going to talk about the Docks Ward, but before we can really get into the city proper, we need to talk about the political system. Drzewodolek is uh, heavily political with the High Elves, and there are numerous factions that all um, mostly are working against each other, and somehow this push and pull between the different groups somehow leads to a coherent society, but it's quite evident that if one thread were to be pulled, it could be the end of the High Elven capital city as we know it. So originally, the elves, and this was back when the Wood Elves and the High Elves were actually one people, and they were just the elves. Back then, the elves were ruled by a king, and really the kings that originally came here to the Prime Plane from the Fey realm, they were the ones that kind of set up the basic foundations of what would later become Drzewodolek. The last king that was ruler was Viduin Ravenala, and uh, something strange happened when he died. So the first thing that happened before he died, of course, was that the elder god of the Council of 12 Elder Gods, Octus, who is Lord of the Shadow Realm and more or less the god of the dead. He's also the god of arcane mystery. He came and he was fascinated by the elves because of their long lives, and he wanted the elves to be a part of the Shadow Realm. And he mostly succeeded in that, getting a group of elves to leave. And when they got to the Shadow Realm, they discovered that um, the advertising was not as it said on the box, and they were fairly miserable. And many of them still are miserable to this day. But Octus coming in and kind of screwed the elves up. He he gifted them with an arcane magical sentient suit of leather armor called the Armor of the Raven, and this was to be a gift to all of to the current Elven King and to all of his offspring thereafter. And it was a trick, a bit of a trick. Not that Octus really has ill intentions for the elves. That's not really it. It's hard to understand the underpinnings of a god's motivations, but in any case, this armor is sentient. It holds a spark of Octus's intellect, making it quite intelligent. But also with that, it basically reports back everything that the wearer sees and does, and the goings on around him back to Octus. And this, of course, we don't know if this was known by the elves um, or what had happened, but this gift of arcane knowledge and this arcane armor really skewed Elven society to lean towards the 12 elder gods, and that pushed them further away from the old faith and their own patron god Sinaz, and this is what caused the schism that led to the Wood Elves splitting off. The Wood Elves are much more conservative, and they don't believe that the elves should be um, having pretty much anything to do with the new faith, and the Wood Elves are disenfranchised with Elven society as a whole, uh, and have left into the various woods and forests of the Braunhaven region continuing their veneration of the old god Sinaz, who created the elves in the first place. And so now you have in High Elven society, which Drzewodolek is now all High Elves, well, mostly all High Elves. It's definitely ruled by all High Elves. You have this weird mix of old faith and new faith. Some of the High Elves do still venerate Sinaz, and then there is also the large majority of the elves, I would say, probably offer worship to both. They have their side of the Council of the 12 Elder Gods, and then they have their veneration of the Old Faith, and so that's probably the majority of the population of the city. But the last ruler, Vidulin Ravenala, when he died, the decision was made to do away with High Elven royalty, and they weren't going to do a monarchy any longer. And instead, the decision was made that line would end with Ravenala, and they would form the High Elven Elder Council. And this is a much more, I guess you could say, democratic way of ruling, rather than everything. Well, it's not really democratic. It's not like every citizen of the elves has a vote, but these 6 members that sit on the Elven Council are basically, they will tell you, looking out for the interests of everybody involved. And the council is led by a Primarch that the rest of the council selects. Those members of the council vote on who is going to be the new Primarch. Usually it's somebody that's already sitting on the council, and then they select somebody to replace that person that has been so elevated. And the Primarch's primary position is, of course, to break ties in the council, and also he or she deals with the guilds themselves directly, meeting with them to bring their concerns to the Elder Council for whatever the next session is. And the current Primarch is Erden Carxissus, and there's only been 4 Primarchs in the entire history of the Elder Council. And so Carxissus has been in position for the last 150 years, and he is old. He is well over 300 years old. And even for an elf, that puts him in his twilight years, because remember, they are mortal on the prime plane. And so Primarch Carxissus has been here for 150 years. He's a shrewd politician, and he has connections to all of the guilds all across Drzewodolek. And this means that he, of course, has amassed quite the network of spies, as well as wealth, because he has investments in almost every guild. Now, the Primarch, of course, I mean, just his position as breaking ties and having the influence of guilds, that's not to say that he's not politically powerful. The fact that he has all of those connections to the different guilds, of course, is what brings him his power. And so the Primarch, and especially Carxissus, is probably the most powerful Primarch that the Elder Council has ever had. Next on the council, you have Councilor Leobella Vasati, and she is a very devout follower of the New Faith. And she has gone so far as to completely eschew any veneration of the Old Faith. She is a firm believer in the idea that the Elven people do not need any assistance or really much contact with the other humans and demi-humans of the Braunhaven region. She sees them, she essentially will tell you that she sees other races as being infantile And in the case of the dwarves, she will tell you that they're brutish. She looks at the old king Viduan Ravenala as like an ideal rather than an actual historical figure. She thinks that the king paved the way for the High Elves to welcome the new faith in and into the hearts and minds of the people of Drzewodolek. She is the a religious, pious counselor of the utmost extreme. She and you because of that. You can always assume that Leobella Visati is going to vote in a particular direction. Usually, that's going to involve uh, the new faith and whatever she believes the Council of the 12 Elder Gods would want for the Elven people. And next, you have Counselor Ayman Renharis. Ayman Renharis, he is best described as looking like a rat wearing an elf skin. He has a smile that immediately lets you know that he is scheming, and he seems frail and a bit shorter than the average high elf, which kind of lends towards this rat-like demeanor that he has. And he is the current guild leader of, or guild master of the Guild of Arborist Laborers and Construction Workers. And this gives him quite a bit of wealth and power, but it is also thought by many, although nobody has confirmed it, that he has ties to the Zilmer, which is the thieves guild that operates within Drzewodolek. And nobody can really confirm nor deny that he has membership in the Zilmer. In fact, nobody really confirms or denies that the Zilmer actually even exists. They're not an official guild, but there they are. The next council member is Kishara Venran. She's an archmage with the Guild of Arcana Magistry, and she is a very, very young high elf to be an archmage. She's 135, and so a lot of the other members of the Arch Guild or Arcana Magistry of the that guild kind of not necessarily look down on her, but they are resentful and jealous of her achievements at such a young age. But she passed the tests that made her an archmage, and so she is quite powerful. But she honestly, they chose her to be on the council thinking that she was going to be a pushover, and she ended up not being a pushover. But for the most part, she only concerns herself with what she deems to be the important stuff. The rest of her time, she wants to focus on studying magic and learning more about magic. And next you have Counselor Navari and Varus, and he is, or they are completely and totally androgynous. It's hard to say, even for other members of the Council of Elders, whether or not Navari and Varus is male or female. And this is not uncommon with the elves. There are many of them that are rather androgynous or perhaps even genderless. I'm sure that they do have a gender, but they appear as they could be one or the other, and so nobody really knows. And honestly, with the elves, nobody really cares. And Navari and Varus is known as being a low-ranking member of the Guild of Artists and Entertainers, and because the elves all have some kind of it's almost a genetic lineage towards arts. The Guild of Artists and Entertainers is almost a ridiculous guild to begin with, because everybody already has some kind of artistic talent, and so that guild has mostly become a social club. And they just the guild doesn't have a whole lot to do, and as such, neither does Navari. But on the council he sits, somehow they got somebody on the Council of Elders. And then you have Dame Laerdia Sorsana, and she is a highly decorated knight of House Sorsana, and she represents not only her house's interests, but also um, she House Sorsana was really the biggest proponent and backer of creating the Council of Elders, and so uh, her father, who is the head of House Sorsana, really is looking forward to the idea that his daughter will be placed sometime in the hopefully near future as the next Primarch. Um, there's some interesting things about House Sorasana. So all of the Elven houses, for instance, have the ability, of course, to knight members of their house, or really anybody. The houses are the last vestige of the old royalty, and when the Council of Elders was created, the houses really lost a lot of their power and influence. But in this case, Sorasana, because they were such huge backers of the Council of Elders, Sorasana is the last Elven house that actually promotes people or knights people for martial purposes. So their knights are the real deal, whereas other houses might knight someone because they are an artist, or they might knight someone because they are um, kind and charitable. House Sorasana says no, you have to be good with the sword, and they take their vows of their knights very seriously. Um, in the case of Laerdia Sorasana, she was actually knighted not only for her martial prowess, but because it was felt by her father that Laerdia actually embodies the entirety of all of what House Sorasana stands for, and this is one reason why they are um, hugely betting on that she will one day become the next Primarch. And then you have Counselor Dalior Ilstina, and he also has a title that is a vestige of the monarchy, in that he is Drzewodolek's Master of the Hunt. That kind of goes back to royalty, but currently it is still a political position, and he does have some political power. He is a fairly capable ranger. And along with that, he is sympathetic to the Wood Elves, and he's a devout follower of the old god Synaz. And so this can put him at odds with other council members, and he's really the voice for the Wood Elves. It is very notable that there are no Wood Elves on the Elder Council, and so in addition to the council members, you also have their attendants. There's a number of attendants, hangers on, guards, what have you. But most notable of those, the first is Ilmadia Orikas, who is a wood elf druid. And of course, being a druid, she venerates the old faith. And she always is hanging on around the outskirts of the council hall chambers, and her biggest sticking point is that there are no wood elves on the Council of Elders. One of the biggest things that have been plaguing the Council of Elders over the past many years, pretty much since the last schism happened, is reintegration of the Wood Elves with the High Elves. They believe there is this common belief throughout society that the two races should merge back, and that would bring a whole to the Elven people. And yet, the High Elven Elder Council, the Council of Elders, refuses to put a Wood Elf on the council. And this is a big thorn in her paw for Ilmadia Orikas, who, pretty much truly sees the Council of Elders for what they are, in that they are all talk, and they don't want to walk the line. Next, you have Ulfinus, and Ulfinus is a half-elf, and half-elves are notoriously treated poorly in Drzewodolek. Generally, you're going to see the half-elves raised by the human parent and left off in whatever town or village that they were conceived in. And they're not treated well by the humans either. They have a pretty rough upbringing. Ulfinus is a perfect example of that. His father left his mother before he was even born, and his mother abandoned him at a young age. And so Ulfinus had to grow up on the streets in various locations, and he ended up falling in with a troupe of traveling entertainers and learned to be an arcane bard. And after traveling for some time, he decided to come to Drzewodolek, trying to find his father. Nobody knows if he ever did find his father. I believe he's still searching. But in his time here, of course, he was treated even worse, being a half-elf. He is a second-class citizen compared to the other high elves or even the wood elves. If you can believe that somebody gets treated worse than them, here you have some half-elves. And he kind of begged and cajoled his way into being assigned to Councillor Navari and Varus as his assistant. And really, Navarus or Envarus barely ever even realizes that Ulfinus is there, and kind of looks down on him and just tolerates his presence. To what end the rest of the Guild of Entertainers and artists and entertainers had to give Ulfinus any kind of reason for being his assistant is up in the air. Nobody quite knows, but there was some push to make him the assistant. Then you have Iowyn Farinor. Iowyn Farinor is a high-ranking officer of the guard in House Hellisarin, and he has been assigned to be Primarch Carxis's personal bodyguard, and she takes her job pretty seriously. But the problem is, the longer that she's with Carxis, the more she disagrees with his politics, and she tries to remain stout in her duty, realizing that politics aren't her thing, and she has no place. But she's becoming more and more disfranchised with Aridin Carxis as time moves on, and a lot of this comes about because Carxis doesn't treat her as a loyal guard. He instead treats her as more or less a servant, and because he treats her as a servant, in a lot of cases, he doesn't even realize that she's in the same room with him. And so this has allowed Iowyn Farinor to be present at some of Carxis's more clandestine meetings, and she gets to witness the underhanded politics that he does in the back rooms more than just about anybody else. And this has soured her taste for the Primarch. So next time we're going to talk about the High Elven houses, and there are 6 High Elven houses that we'll go through, and we'll try to touch on guilds as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.